I have a lot to say typically amongst my peers, and I used to be much more vocal about my opinions. Like I used to drive around with a sticker on my car that said 9/11 was an inside job, and I'm still tempted to, but I feel like I've gotten so sick of defending my stance against sleepy people that don't care what I think, and so I feel like but I still felt like the social need, because 9/11 was an inside job bumper sticker was part of my waking up process. Someone else having that same sticker on their car is the reason I put it on my car, because I was, I thought about it. It wouldn't leave my head, and I started Googling about it, and it brought me back to September 11th, because it was probably almost a decade after the fact when I really started focusing on it more. And that just became like a lighthouse in the fog for questioning reality, questioning the narrative.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have a duty to my other sleepy citizens to rattle their cages a bit with a sticker that makes them think, but I realized it ended up with me feeling more lonely and more despair than I think it was worth. Now I don't know what it's worth, because I have no idea how many people read that sticker and thought, wow, like that's amazing, and actually went and dug further. Right. And I used to give the sticker to my friends to put on their car, and most of them wouldn't, because they felt the same shame, right? They put it on their fridge in their bar or in their garage or something, But I even used to put it on my amplifier. So when I was on stage, you'd see the sticker on my amplifier too,
Yeah.
And and it's funny because like people would say like, you believe it, and you think George Bush bombed the towers? And I'm like, no, I didn't say that. George Bush isn't the only guy on the inside. He just happened to be the guy on top. I don't think George Bush had any clue what was going on there.
No, he didn't. There's that beautiful moment when he's
upside down book.
He's in. Well, I don't know about the upside down book. Yes, I think it is. Yes, it's just a perfect. It's a perfect moment. A terrible, tragic thing, of course, but there's that moment where he's in the school and he's told, what's happened, and you can see his face.
Yeah, he's sitting in a kindergarten class.
Yeah, you can see his face.
Yeah.
He has not a clue what's going on. That was not the face of a man who went,
yeah,
oh yeah, that's happened. Oh, cool. Okay, we'll give me a minute. I'll just finish up here.
Exactly.
That was a guy who was like, what does this mean? Am I in the frame for this? What does this mean? What's happening? Yeah, there was that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was I remember watching that coming home from work and seeing all that happen. Gee, that was something else. Yeah, you knew that day the world had changed. Whatever had happened, the world was just going to be different after that. And boy, was it different.
I knew I was going to get my balls grabbed more at the border. I'm going to get groped a lot more now.
Oh, yeah. All of that stuff.
So the point I was trying to get to there was that I've, out of all the songs I've released, like I've released about 100 songs or something. I don't know how many I've released. Under Death by Design, only 4 songs I've ever made have any political leaning to them. And they're on one album, that Dark Days album I made. And sometimes I'm almost ashamed of the songs, because I felt confident in I still agree with everything I said in those songs. I don't disagree with anything in those songs, but I feel like I'm afraid people will listen to them and be like, oh, he's one of those guys. I can't listen to anything he does or says, because there's 4 songs in there. One's called, and only one of them's instrumental. So there's actually only 3 songs, that are political in there. One's called Dark Days. One's called I Live in the Shadows or something. Or something about the shadows.
Hide in the shadows. I'm looking at it now. Hide in the shadows.
Yeah, and then the big long COVID, or was it
Distance?
Was it Lockstep?
Distance Dance and the Masquerade
Distance Dance,
of the
Masquerade.
Lockstep March of the COVID and the Lockstep March of the COVID Parade. What a great title!
Thank you. Right, and that was, and it's meant to be like a bit of a joke and a bit of and even the song represents like the way we felt during the lockdowns, right? Because we were being told 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Is that what they're telling you over there?
Oh yeah, we got all the same messaging. I know what messaging you got, because I saw what was coming out of America, and it just cascaded all around the world. So I saw what you guys were getting. I saw what Australia was getting. A lot of Europe got it as well, but some parts of Europe just didn't go with it. But we did here, and oh yeah, God, yeah.
I'm not enough of it. I'm not a simple person, so I understand that when you're dealing with a virus, regardless if it was legit or whatever it was, when you're dealing with something like that, there's no way to know how to deal with it. Like, there's no way to know what's going to happen in 2 weeks or a month, right? Like, maybe they knew because there was more information available to them, but us as laymen's, like, we don't know if this virus is going to kill 50% of people or is it going to kill 1% of people. We don't know. So giving a mandate like 2 weeks to flatten the curve, any smart person knows that's a hopeful estimation. Like, you can't expect that to be reality, but But that's a good way to coerce the majority of people into following suit, right? They go, okay, 2 weeks, I can stay home for 2 weeks. I can do that. I can put on a mask for 2 weeks and order groceries online. I can do that, right? And then it's a month, and it's 2 months, and it's 6 months, right? So in the song I was trying to represent, because if you listen to that song, it sounds like it stops about 5 times.
Right.
It's about to end like 5 times. It just keeps going, and it gets more comical and absurd musically as it goes, because it's supposed to sound like a carnival of never-ending attractions of absurdity, right? And that's why I wanted to represent it that way, because it was like a media circus constantly.
Did you, right? It was when you were doing that, did you have that in mind as you were doing it or before you were doing it? Was that part of the cognitive process of making it?
No, actually. No, the song was me flexing my muscles on my Pro 1 synthesizer. I just wrote a song, the one Spiritually Dismantled by a Car Salesman. That was the first song I made of the album. That was my first song I ever used a synthesizer on, like a legit analog synth, and with the synthesizer as the main instrument. I'd used a few like iPad and iPhone synths and visual synths as solo instruments here and there, but for the most part, that was it. I was sitting there with the synthesizer programming it, and then so when I started making this song here, that Distance Dance song, it wasn't supposed to be a 21-minute long song, right? I just came up with a riff and an idea, and it just kept morphing, and the ideas just kept flooding my head. And then the song informed the meaning of it, right? Like the song spoke to me. Like this song is a never-ending circus, right? And I was at home, I was angry. I just finished writing that album about Sterling, and my anger about Sterling and the failure of the medical system quickly shifted to the failure of our government and the way they're handling the pandemic, and the way I was feeling, because I was in a unique position, right? I wasn't one of the many that got to stay home and work from home or take time off work and take advantage of what the thing, as Devin Townsend calls it, the great pause, right? Where people just put their lives on pause and sit at home and not worry about it, right? I wasn't in that position because I had to go into people's homes and fix appliances, right? So I had to continue to leave the house, drive the empty highways, see all the lineups at the grocery stores, right? And just exist as a normal human being while everybody else isn't. And then enter homes, and I was watching the psychosis affect every family the same way, right? Like,
wow, yeah.
Like it was weird. Like I remember like hearing on the radio, oh, we're out of scissors. There's no scissors anywhere. Everybody bought all the scissors because they're cutting their own hair because they can't get their hair cut, right? And I'm in every house I'm in, there's fucking hair on the floor. People are cutting their own hair, and I'm going like, and I'm going wow. Like, and my house isn't doing that because I'm not able to fall into the spell, right? Because I'm having to do this, and then all of a sudden you can't buy yeast and flour because everybody's making sourdough bread at home, and I'm walking into every house and there's sourdough bread on the counter, and I was like, not only has this experiment worked to get people to do what they're told to do, these unknown artificial artifacts are coming out of it, that people are literally, even though they're not talking to each other or leaving their home, they're moving along in lockstep whether they know it or not. And I realized that I thought the internet was going to break the system's control it had on us. And maybe we realize that the internet is just another cage we've been put inside of, that they've used against us, and they've used and like Alex Jones would say, he says one of his biggest catchphrases is that there's a war on for your mind. Like there's a war happening, but it's not with guns, it's not with missiles, it's with information. It's an information war, right? That's why his website's called Infowars.com. It's not until you really see the big picture, you start to realize how brilliant people like him are and how they really see things and put them in a contextual way. He's a madman who can't keep his mind straight. He's always going in 100 different directions. I'm pretty sure he's autistic or something, but he has something going on that makes him different than the rest of us. But that all aside, that song was all informed by those experiences, right? Like I'm going home and I'm dealing with, my son's death with no funeral, no family members at the hospital. Right, I'm watching the entire society collapse on itself over a very ended up being a very minor bug or just a new cold that's going to float around forever now. And I felt myself being gutted and left as a hollow human being, and everything I was told to expect from my family and my friends and society was taken away from me. But I was still expected to deal with all the shit I'd had to deal with, So it put me in a very dark place. So. Long answer for a short question was that yes, like the song didn't have that intention, but I was in that spot when I was making the song that I just felt anger, and that's why all those lyrics were there. Like about how like the song is about division and how they're going to just tear us apart. Like there's lines in the song like about mothers turning in their sons and fathers turning in their daughters to the authorities for not following the rules, and and all this stuff about like living in a cage and being brave enough to bark at the moon, and or howl at the moon, as I say in the song, and which actually was something I quoted a friend of mine, because my buddy Drew, who's like probably the person that knows me better than anybody on earth. I called him during the pandemic because him and I weren't that close at that point. And I said, at the beginning of the pandemic, he was all on board with the staying at home, social distancing, all that stuff. And I asked him for help because I was moving. I bought a house at the beginning of the pandemic, not knowing we were going to go into lockdown. And I needed help to move all my shit to my new house. And he told me no, he couldn't help me because he was afraid he might make his parents sick. And coming from him, like, I bet you if he's listening to this right now, he might deny he actually said that, because he'd be so ashamed of himself, because he knows that if I call him for help, I need help. And that shouldn't have kept him away from helping me, but he bought it up. So, as the months went by, I called him up again and said, are you starting to see what's going on here the way I'm seeing it? Like, and he's like, yeah. And because he had kept his mind away from the conspiratorial type mindset that they would label us with, he referred to it. He goes, look, Chris, I'm sorry. I'm going to crawl into my cage and howl at the moon with you. And that's why that line came in, because that's what it feels like. You feel like you're a lone wolf screaming at the nothing for no reason other than just to get that energy out of you,
Yeah.
So like, I feel shame though. Like, I don't want to show that song to people. I don't recommend that song to people, because I don't want people to judge me and be like, oh, you're one of those assholes, and the only time I've ever even known someone else other than like my immediate family listening to the song, because I played it for them, was I posted that album on Reddit. Every time I come up with a new album, or if I think about it, I go to Reddit, to the psychedelic music forum, the prog rock forums, and the synthesizer forums more recently, and just showcase my new songs.
Uh-huh.
And a guy listened to that song from the prog rock and sent me a really nice comment about how he said, the fact that you can write a 21-minute song that wasn't boring and kept my interest all the way through is an incredible talent. Keep it up. He didn't mention anything but the lyrics, and he told me he doesn't like electronic music, so he probably never listened to the song again. But he said it was remarkable. But and that felt nice, and I was glad he didn't mention his opinion on the lyrics. I don't care what anybody thinks about the lyrics, because the song was for me more than this for anybody else. It's not meant to be a bumper sticker. It's meant to be a howl at the moon.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, because the reason I asked, whether that was in your mind as you were creating it, because I was re-listening to the show that we did, the very first show that I was on the radio show.
Nice.
And it's something I was talking about then. The fact that you quite often you feel like a passenger in a lot of ways. That you make a piece, and that would be a good example. Distance Dance, the Masquerade, and the Lockstep March of the COVID Parade. That's a good example of it, where you're creating something that's it's like riding a waterfall. You just have no control over where you end up or what happens to it, and you end up with, in your case, a 21-minute piece that means something and has some kind of impact, but it's not often known. I find, and I think you do as well, it's not often, you don't often know what was really going on until much later. So what I would say about that piece is that you've got some reservations about it now with all the things you talked about, but as time goes by, you might find that piece takes on a different relevance. You can imagine a point in the future where what you're talking about in that piece is, everybody knows that now. Everybody knows that it was a masquerade and a parade, and we accept that now. So you look like a prescient genius, So what I find with musical pieces is that they go through a life as time goes on. They have different significance as time goes on, and you find some of the things that you said when you were 20 in a piece of music turn out to be prescient. If you make enough music, just by the law of averages says that something will look very, very clever, where it wasn't really at the time. It'll just look that way. But in actual fact, I think maybe it is. Maybe we are in touch with something. That the reason that we make these statements and we put this stuff down like that is that we are connected to something. We're connected to something that's going to happen, or something that will change, and that we put these as markers. We don't necessarily think about them that way, but that's what they actually turn into. I've done enough music for enough time to see that happen, several times, to see a song have a relevance that it didn't have at the time. Like I did a song years and years ago called Forget Myself, I Forget Myself, which I didn't really know what I was doing. But when I listen to that song now, I go, oh wow, I know what that's about now. That is about as you get older, you begin to forget who you were, you know. But I didn't know that when I wrote that when I was 30 or 25, whenever I wrote it, you know. So songs do have a musical life, a musical lifetime, I think, and that'll if we're lucky, these things will go on way into the future, way past us. I hope people are looking back in 1,000 years' time and thinking, those guys knew what they were talking about.
And I hope you're right too. And it's funny because, like, even though I say like I'm afraid to recommend that song, I did put it on the list, our listening list, a couple weeks ago, and I forget why, what initiated it. Because I was listening to the song. I think I put the album Dark Days on in the car one day. I think it's because I had a long drive and you told me you're listening to Everything Part 3 or Volume 3 or whatever.
Right.
And so on my phone, I was like, I'm going to listen with him. I put it on because I had like a 4-hour drive ahead of me. So I put it on and I listened along. And then Dark Days came on afterwards, I think. Just my YouTube just recommended it. And I listened to it. And I was listening to that. And there's 2 versions of the song, which you have. You got my entire discography. So you have there's a single version that has no voiceover in it from Alex Jones. And then the album version, there's Alex Jones in there. I have him talking about oppression and about how the system is dividing us and controlling the way we think. And it was a recording of Alex Jones from about 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago. Right. It's nothing recent. Did you ever see a movie called Waking Life?
Doesn't ring a bell.
You should write that one down. It's one of the best movies I've ever seen. And I think, and you'll watch it and be like, oh my God, I can't believe I don't know this movie. And it's amazing in so many ways I wasn't prepared. Because it's unlike anything you've ever seen before. And it'll make you think about things you might not have ever thought about before. Waking Life. It's a movie by Rick Linklater. I think it came out in 1998 or 1999, something like that. But there's a scene in that, Alex Jones is in the movie. And he's driving around in his car with a loudspeaker on top of the car. He's just screaming his thoughts as he's driving around the streets, trying to wake people up. You know, and what he says in that movie, I didn't realize it was Alex Jones when I watched the movie. I had no idea who Alex Jones was in 1998.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You know, so most people didn't. Most people didn't know who he was before September 11th, because September 11th made him famous because he called it 6 months before. He called it that it was going to happen. Right? He was begging people to call the White House and demand they don't do this. You know, and then when it happened, he got famous because they're like, oh my God, he was right. You know, so he didn't say planes would crash into the Twin Towers, but if you watch his predictions of it, it's typical Alex Jones stuff. Like he's getting information from people that you don't know where it's coming from, and he knows they've been doing these drills. He knew that the Navy and the Air Force have been doing drills about a massive terrorist attack happening in New York City. Right, and he's going, anytime they do these drills, it's because they're getting ready to prepare for it, and it's part of the confusion. Because what his answer was, not to go into September 11th more, is that the drills are part of the distraction, because it's easier to get away with something if the military isn't ready for it. Because when they practice something over and over and over again, when the real thing happens, they just think it's part of the drill, so they don't react properly, right? And they're told this, and if they're told to stand down, they do, because they think because that's what happened, right? Like the Air Force was told to stand down and not intervene with those jets before they hit the buildings, even though they've been practicing that maneuver for months. Right, so they thought that it was just called off today. Yeah, right, and it was even on CNN. It was on CNN, like on the ticker tape thing along the bottom. They said that the Coast Guard or the Navy is called off, interference or whatever it was supposed to be, and then that quickly got forgotten. Right, you only find it in like documentaries that have been made about the truth or whatever. Right, that pull that out.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the point being is that when I listened to that, I found when I heard it again the other day driving to New Brunswick. Listening to Alex Jones do his inspirational speech made me well up with pride a little bit. And I kind of probably wanted to, and I remember thinking, I want to get Perry's opinion on this song. Not that I'm saying we should listen to it right now, because we did Death by Design last episode too, and it's a 21-minute long song. So I don't want to jump into it right now or anything. But that's why I put it in the list, I think, because I really wanted to probably talk to you about it, you know, because I'm obviously very sensitive about that particular song, and I'd like to know how it resonates with other people outside my head.
Well, let's listen to it then. Let's do that. Why not do that?
Yeah.
Why not?
You think we should?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
All right, then. So the song is called Distance Dance, the Masquerade, and the Lockstep March of the COVID Parade. And every part of that sentence is supposed to be a commentary on the COVID pandemic and our reaction to it. The distance, the social distancing, and the dancing around each other and not knowing how to behave with your neighbors and people you used to be comfortable with. The masquerade is hiding your face with the mask, of course. The Lockstep March, self-explanatory. Every country in the world worked together in a way I've never seen before, which I think is as much of an experiment as it was meant to be an actual activity of preventative measures. And then, of course, the word COVID and what it was all about, and the parade of just the marching, like the Lockstep March, the absurdity behind it, the lies being told, the excuses for the lies, and the fact that Big Pharma took all of our money again, somehow.
It's so funny how that always works out, eh?
I'd say it's a 21-minute long song, and it features what I think is the best use I've made of my Pro 1 synthesizer. So there's lots of layers, but it's all a monophonic synth. So if you hear a chord, that's 3 tracks of me recording individual notes. So this song probably took me the longest to make out of any song I've ever made, and it was a labor of love. I enjoyed every minute of it, and I never had a headache once through it. The song came out of me like you said, like painting a waterfall or something, or it was just... for me, it's a crowning achievement in my mind for my musical abilities and what I've done.
Okay, so this is, let me see if I can do this title. Distance Dance, the Masquerade, and the Lockstep March of the COVID Parade. And that's from the album Dark Days.
Dark Days.
From Dark Days. And this, of course, is available on Bandcamp.
Darkness everywhere, bound by these chains. Are you all still gonna pretend? Wrapped up in this chain, can you see just who they are? Caged in your prison of pain. Do you believe what they are saying?
Propaganda rolling across the picket line. Lay down, GI, lay down, GI. We saw it all through the 20th century. And now in the 21st century, it's time to stand up and realize that we should not allow ourselves to be crammed into this rat maze. We should not submit to dehumanization. I don't know about you, but I'm concerned with what's happening in this world. I'm concerned with the structure. I'm concerned with the systems of control. Those that control my life and those that seek to control it even more. I want freedom! That's what I want! And that's what you should want!
They will turn friends against each other. Fathers will turn on the daughters, and mothers will turn in the sons. The rest will burn us all.
to realize we're being conditioned on a mass scale. Start challenging this corporate slave state. The 21st century is going to be a new century. Not the century of slavery, not the century of lies and issues of no significance, and classism and statism and all the rest of the modes of control. It's going to be the age of humankind standing up for something pure and something right. What a bunch of garbage, liberal, Democrat, conservative, Republican. It's all there to control you, two sides of the same coin. Two management teams bidding for control, the CEO job of Slavery Incorporated. The truth is out there in front of you, but they lay out this buffet of lies. I'm sick of it, and I'm not going to take a bite out of it. Do you got me? Resistance is not futile. We're going to win this thing. Humankind is too good. We're not a bunch of underachievers. We're going to stand up, and we're going to be human beings. We're going to get fired up about the real things, the things that matter. Creativity and the dynamic human spirit that refuses to submit. Fired up about the real things, about the real things, the things that matter. Creativity. We have got to realize that being conditioned on a mass scale. Human spirit that refuses to submit. Fired up about the real things, the things that matter. I'm sick of it, and I'm not going to take a bite out of it. Human spirit that refuses to submit.
My goodness. I mean, that is an epic, that. It really is. There's so many different parts to it. You never let it rest long enough for it to be outstaying its welcome. So you're always moving on. And I know you're a big fan of Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails, and that, I think that's one of the tracks where I can hear it, to some extent at least. The pounding of the bass note and the bass drum that you use at the start is literally like having a nail banged into your head in some way, you know. And there's a point where that keeps going when everything else is stopped, and it's just pound, 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 pound. And I remember thinking, please stop, please stop with the pounding. And just as I was thinking it, you did, and I thought, well, that was perfect. You know, that was perfect. You just did it enough to make the point. Musically, that is, what word would you describe? Epic is one of the words, I suppose. It's vast in scope. It has lots going on musically all the time. Texturally, you use a limited palette. You use a limited palette of organic kind of analog synthesizer sounds, and you use the piano as contrast. You've got the electronic drums, and then in that mix you've got this angst-ridden guy who's just shouting at the world, really, is what I think you're doing there in a lot of it, and it comes across. It's not an easy listen, I'll say that. It's not. There's no way that you could say that is an easy thing that you could just listen to. I would say enter with caution would be my... If you're going to listen to this seriously, if you're going to take it for what it is, this is one of those pieces of music that, if this was... it's one side of an album. If this was released in the Pink Floyd era, this would have been right up there. You know, this would have changed the world if it was released in that era. The fact that it's now hidden away in a little corner of the internet that only you and I and a few others know about has got nothing to do with what it is. It's a significant piece of work. It does change a world, it changes your world, and it changes my world having listened to it. So it does change the world. If 1 million people listen to this, there would be hundreds of thousands whose lives would be changed by listening to that, because it does take you back to all of that nonsense that the title, the lengthy title, alludes to, and the fact that you've got one of the prophets of that whole thing, Alex Jones, in there speaking about it before it happened, is, you know, I don't think you need to worry about this piece seeming too... I think you're kind of worried that you'll be judged as one of those people, one of those conspiracy theorist kind of people. I don't think you need to worry about that at all. I think if this piece of music has a life, it will go on to have exactly the right kind of life. It will be one of those pieces of music that people look at and go, that's kind of what it was like. There's one interpretation of it, and it's an interpretation I think would speak to a lot of people. Definitely. It's brilliant. But it's brilliant in a way that is not easy, I would say. It's not the kind of piece that you could just say, here, just listen to this. This is what Chris does. I wouldn't do that. I would say you get to this. I would say you get to this at a certain point. You arrive here. And, I mean, the album's called Dark Days. The title says what it's about. Nobody can blunder into this. And I don't think they should, you know. But it was brilliant. And it didn't seem like 21 minutes. It really didn't. It was like... I've got a piece of music we've talked about before that I think does that as well, where there's enough going on, it changes, and it, like Tubular Bells, the first side of Tubular Bells feels 20 minutes long, because although it's got lots of changes, a lot of them sit for a long time, especially the intro, that 7/8/4/4 intro sits for a long time, so you're wanting it to move on, so it does feel like 20 minutes. This doesn't feel like 20 minutes, this feels like, I don't know, 10, 8, I don't know. But yeah, that was extraordinary thing.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I had a lot of fun making that. You know, well, fun, I guess, is a weird word. The most time I spent was a part I almost forgot about. Was like all the symbols around, I don't know, it's around like 14 minutes in or something like that, where I'm dragging a cello bow across all my cymbals.
Oh, right.
Right. So, yeah, and I spent about 12 hours recording that part, and I recorded it before the song was made. I woke up one morning, in the depth of my darkness with the Sterling stuff, and I woke up. It was a Sunday morning. I woke up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I had it in my head that all I wanted to do was go downstairs and record the sound of cymbals being activated by a cello bow. And my intention was just to grab my biggest ride cymbal, clean it up nice, and get the best sound out of it I could. And then I thought, well, let's see what the other ride cymbal sounds like, and my other ride cymbal, and let's see what the crash cymbals sound like. And by the time I was done, I'd done it to every cymbal I owned. And then I found too that depending on the kind of pressure you put on the bow and the angle you have, you get different octaves. It's always the same note, but you can get 3 different octaves from one cymbal.
Yeah.
Right. So then I started categorizing them by note, right, and then tuning them if they were out of tune, and then I programmed them into a sampler. So I had every note on my keyboard was the right note of a dragged cymbal. And then I tuned them to fill the gaps. So if I had like a gap of 3 notes, I would tune one up 2 semitones, one up 1 semitone, and one down a semitone to fill the gaps, and playing that on the keyboard. And I'm playing the same melody to a certain degree that is played on the piano later, but you can't tell it because it's so disembodied and it doesn't sound melodic, but it is. You know? And it's so horrifying. It builds so much tension. Like it was. Yeah, there is
a very definite dark unease to that whole piece, which is it's not easy for me as a non-musicologist to grab hold of why that is, but it is dark. It is dark, and if that technique that you're talking about, if you listen to, oh gosh, now which album would it be on? I can't remember which of the Can albums it's on, but Can did that with some metal sculptures. The studio that they had was in a castle, and in the foyer of the castle there were these metal sculptures that the person who owned the castle, who was a sculptor, had made, and they did that exact same thing. They drew violin bows and cello bows over these big metal sculptures and got this amazing sound that for decades I didn't know what the hell that sound was. I thought it was a synthesizer or something, but then it turned out to be that. So it's a really disturbing sound because it has a lot of harmonics in it, but they're not the kind of harmonics that I don't know what they are actually. I don't know. You know better than I do what the kind of harmonic content of the of that kind of sound is. It's you said you tuned it, so there must be a fundamental that you tuned.
Well, yeah. So when I'm tuning it, I imagine the harmonics all move with it too, like in uniform. I imagine. I'm really not certain.
Yeah, they would. Yeah.
So the way I tuned it, so the way I would tune it is just by using I don't know what I use. I don't use Melodyne. I'm trying to remember what I use. It might have just been the onboard Steinberg tuner that comes with Cubase. Yeah. Which I think works terribly. It's a terrible, if you're trying to use it for vocal correction, it sounds like shit. But it does really neat things to sounds that it's not intended to tune, because it's made to tune vocals. But I find, like I said, I never use it for tuning vocals. I only use it for tuning oddities like that, right, where I want to use it in a musical sense. So yeah, I'm not sure, and I do, and it's funny because the fact that you mentioned harmonics in that session of me recording those cello bows on the cymbals caused me to go through a bizarre reevaluation of reality for about a week afterwards, because I started thinking about how much an object has an effect on its own harmonic output, right? Because you don't think about it growing up. You hear a trombone, you hear a trumpet, you hear a flute, those 3 different things all sound drastically different, and you don't think about why they sound different. They do, but they sound different because they look different, and it reminds me of there's a band in Canada that was fairly popular here in Canada. You might never heard of them before, called The Tea Party. You should check them out if you don't know them. They're a great Canadian band. But the lead singer was always being criticized for sounding like Jim Morrison. No. But he looks like Jim Morrison. Right? So
he looks like him. He must sound like, yeah.
Yeah, well, because his jaw, his cheeks, his head is shaped like Jim Morrison's head. So why wouldn't he sound like Jim Morrison when he sings, right? I wouldn't expect the tuba to sound like a trumpet. For a tuba to sound like a trumpet, it'd have to look like a trumpet, right? So I started looking at things and realizing that sound and physical objects are directly related, and the sound waves that come off of a physical object are shaped like the object making the sounds. and it created this like really bizarre thing with me because I was watching the cymbals vibrate, and watching the way they flex, and realizing that the way the cymbal sound vibrates in the air is the same way the cymbal vibrates when you hit it, and it was really neat. So I found myself, and then at the same time I found a video by Andrew Huang, that YouTuber from Toronto that I like. We both talked about, the music guy, and he just did a video about the harmonic series and trying to teach it like in a practical way or a theoretical way about what the harmonic series means and how it represents sound. Because for up until that moment, when I thought of a piano playing an A, it's just an A. I didn't realize it was full of G's and D's and C's.
But
the majority is an A. But with cymbals aren't tuned the way musical instruments tune. So there's all sorts of unexpected harmonics that you wouldn't expect to have in an A note or a B note, right? So it's because I don't think when they build a cymbal, they're not thinking, I think, about the note, obviously, because most of them aren't bang on tune, right? They're not right in the 440 hertz properly. So either that happened because of age and the cymbal's worn out over time, and maybe it was tuned properly when it left the factory, or they don't care, right? Because you can tune your drums, but I've never heard of a drummer going like, oh, I need another A crash and I need another D crash. They just go by the tonality of it and the size of it and how they like it and compared to the rest of their drums, right? So, I started contemplating that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure what it is about the harmonics of a cymbal that's or dragging a bow across a metal structure compares, but I'm guessing it's because the harmonic series isn't aligned with any musical intention, so it creates a bizarre tension. The bass note's still there, but it's not accompanied with any note you'd expect it to be accompanied with. There's lots of sharps and flats that normally wouldn't be in there that probably aren't in tune properly either. So
yeah, there's a lot of experimentation you can do with that with modern synthesis, because in the old days you were kind of stuck with what the harmonics were. You could sweep the filters, which would sweep some of the harmonics, but it would just really emphasize what was already there. But you can build harmonics in modern synthesizers, so you can experiment with all that. You can take a fundamental and then move the harmonics that are associated with that fundamental. What you find is that like an organ note is a fundamental with a series of harmonics associated with it, and if you change those harmonics, the root note is still the same, but the whole feeling of the rest of it changes. So it's still the harmonic, it's still the fundamental, it's still a G, but then all of the harmonics are not in the key of G. So you can make it sound, it'll still to the listener's ear still be a G, but it's got that unsettling sort of component to it. And you can sweep those harmonics as well. You can create, if you use sine tones, you can create your own, because a sine tone is just a pure tone. It shouldn't have any harmonics. And if you put distortion on it, you'll see, if you look at it on a scope, you'll see the harmonics appear, and that's called obviously harmonic distortion. And then you can sweep that harmonic distortion and then sweep that around, so you can get all of these. There's a great Kraftwerk track that messes with that. It's on the Man Machine album.
Love that album.
It's the one that starts. It's got a note that was dong, woo, and then another note that was dong, woo. And that's what they're doing. They're not sweeping the harmonics, but they're changing the notes until you end up with this chord that's been created of all the different notes being triggered and then rising up. And I've used that technique as well. And it's fascinating to just mess about with the harmonics. That's a brilliant part of modern synthesis.